There's a lot of you here. It's kind of nerve-wracking, but we're going to do this. It's going to be good, okay? So, for those of you who haven't seen that video, by the way, thanks Josh for making that. That was real cool. My name's Megan. I'm 16 years old, which puts me in Gen Z. So, we've been doing this series at the moment, and it's a Generation Me We series, and this is the 5th installment of it, and I get to talk to you guys today about being the voice of change in godly social justice, which is kind of exciting, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So just for a quick recap for anyone who wasn't here, because I wasn't here for the first one, but the first one we had Jordan, and he was chatting to us about kingdom purpose and the story of Daniel. Then the second week we had Walter, and he was talking about servant leadership and the fact that the simplicity is in the simple. Then we had Nate, and he was talking about creativity and how we're all creative beings, and that was really cool. And last week we had Jamie, and Jamie was talking about intentional living and values, so intentionally adding value to people. And lucky you guys, you get me now. It's going to be good. Okay, so to start off, I kind of said before, but I'm in Gen Z, and my generation, we're really loud. So if anyone doesn't know about Gen Z, well, we're like the social media generation, and we've got all this stuff like blasted in our faces. I know, not that kind of loudness, but when I was younger, my parents and my auntie and uncle, they had this competition, and it was who could get the children the loudest gift for Christmas and for our birthday. So it ended up, I think I got a megaphone. Ben got a megaphone as well, but it was one that changed his voice so he could be like a robot or an alien and that kind of thing. But my parents ended up winning because they got this thing, and it was kind of like a gun, and you pulled it back and then you shot it forward, and it made this farting sound, and it was called a fartzooka. So actually we were there just like a couple of weeks ago, and they had it out, and the younger kids, they were like putting it in everyone's faces. And yeah, so mum and dad definitely trumped down that one and won. But not that kind of loudness, but we've had that kind of loudness, but we've also had other kinds of loudness in our generation. So because of social media and all that sort of thing, we have ended up that we've got like advertisements, reality television, messages, subliminal messages, and all this expectations. And because we've had this loudness coming at us, we've ended up being really loud ourselves. And yeah, we're young, we're silly, we do dumb things sometimes. So it's figuring out for us like when enough is enough, and how not to take it too far, and like not getting caught up in misconceptions and getting lost and all that sort of thing. But because we've got this awesome platform in the form of social media, things like social justice and being the voice of change kind of just comes naturally to us because we've got this awesome platform. But the thing is like we're in a church, right? So we're trying to figure out how this kind of applies to us and like using a voice in a God way, if that makes sense. So we're a God-gifted generation. We've got this awesome capacity to have this voice and change things and talk to people, but it's figuring out how to use our gifts for kingdom purpose, sort of like what Geordie was talking about the first week, which leads us to the question, and we go, what is social justice under God's umbrella of kingdom purpose? Yeah, it's up on the slide for you guys, and that's a pretty big question, but luckily it's laid out pretty clear for us in the Bible in these 2 verses. And the first one is Philippians 2 verse 4, and it says, "Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but each of you to the interests of others." And that's kind of being like, don't be self-absorbed, don't only worry about yourself, be there for other people. Go out of your way to help them and be there for them and like look after people. That's basically the general gist of that. And then there's a second verse, which is in Matthew, and it says, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." So that's kind of talking about how we're God's creations and we're created in his image. So when we help other people, we help him. When we serve other people, we serve him. So when you put those two together, we kind of get that godly social justice is looking after one another in service to God. Yeah? Yeah, got it. Oh, that's good. Yeah, so we got it now. We got what it is, looking after one another in service to God. And that's all well and good, but how is it achieved? And how I've kind of laid it out is I've got these 6 factors of godly social justice, and I'm going to chat to you a little bit about each of them. I wish I could go even more in depth because they're all such awesome things, but we're just going to whiz through it and see how we go. So the first one I've kind of talked to you about, which is having a voice and speaking up for others. So we've got this platform to share from, and It's not an option for us. In the Bible it says, speak up for those who cannot speak up for themselves. Ensure justice for those being crushed. So we aren't told, like, if you feel like it, if you have time today, or if you can get around to it, we're commanded. We're like, speak up, ensure justice, just do it, like Nike. Yeah, so we've been commanded to have a voice, and we've been commanded to speak up for people, which is why it's a first factor of having like godly social justice, or achieving godly social justice. So the second one, if that could pop up on the screen, is a passion for change. And that's a pretty awesome thing, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, oh, how am I going to explain this? But you see, the thing is, it's human nature to change things, right? If we see something we don't like, we're going to do something about it. If we hear something we don't like, we're going to do something about it. If, like, you haven't seen the world today, it's lots of people, lots of opinions. We all want to change something. Everyone wants to make a difference. So a while ago, we had a series, and it was the 30 Days to Live series. And it was like, what are you going to do if you only have this much time left? And everyone was like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to change this, I'm going to go and do this, and it's going to be epic, and I'm going to live this awesome life completely changed. So it's about, like, if you find out something you don't like, or if you see something you don't like, or if you do something you don't like, you're going to change it and make it better. So I was kind of like Googling a little bit, and I found out the top 5 things that people say when they're dying or when they're on their deathbeds, and it's always, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. I wish that I'd let myself be happier. I wish I had. I wish that. I wish I hadn't. All that sort of thing. We all want to change things. We love to change things, and we're constantly reevaluating things, and we're constantly improving things. And how far we've come and how far we will go is completely due to change. If we can pop up. Yeah, there it is. So, yeah, just as an example, you can see, like phones. That's a pretty massive thing. We've started off with like the phones attached to the wall, and then we got like the cord phone, you have to carry it all around, and then we had the Nokias, and those are, actually I think some people still use those, but yeah, they're still kind of old, And now we've got like the iPhone X, which is the most recently released one, but we've kind of like been on a course of improvement and making things better, and like I bet the people way back when they had these phones and that was their only phone, they couldn't even imagine having like this little piece of plastic in your pocket that you touch, and then it's like, whoa, everything. Yeah, but how far we have come and how far we will go is due to change. But because we're in church, and like if we're going to bring Christianity into it, we've got to go, okay, but what's the difference between change and godly change? Yeah? So, I don't know, I thought that was pretty cool. That's an artist called Banksy, and yeah, that's kind of like Gen Z as well. So what's the difference between change and godly change? And I was thinking about it, and I was like, change can be for the better or for the worse. It's a word that covers both aspects of it. But godly change is always going to be growth, and it's always going to be love, and it's always going to be taking action for God. And there's this verse in 1 John, and it goes, "Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and truth." He's saying, like, we can't just want to do something or say we're going to do something or tell people, like, yeah, this would be such a great idea to do, but how we show our love and how we achieve godly change is actually physically getting up and doing something about it. So there's this book that I really love, and when I was listening back to the video, I was like, dang, I should have said this book. But yeah, it's this book that's written by Bob Goff, and it's called Love Does, and one of the quotes from it that I really love is that love is never stationary. So love is always getting up, and love is always doing something, and love is a big part of godly change. So we got to get up, and we got to do things, and we got to like be ready to just get out there, I guess. So it's about being passionate for godly change and about being passionate for growth and taking action for God and love. So that's why a passion for change is my second factor of godly social justice. So my third one is actually a heart for giving. And I don't know about you guys, but have you ever given someone a gift, or have you like done something for someone and then you feel this like sense of satisfaction, like, yeah, I did a good job, that was awesome, I should do that again sometime. I'm going to call that the thrill of giving, and because our brains are kind of wired in a way that it means we feel rewarded, or we feel good when we do something good for someone else and we can see that it's good. Yeah? So now I get to talk a bit about me and Mum, which is kind of cool. She's giving me the eyebrows. But yeah, there's these things called love languages, and there's heaps of different ones. There's like touch and words and doing acts of service. My mum is acts of service, so if you ever want to like show love to her, just go and do something for her and she'll be so excited. But I think there are also ways that we express love. And both me and Mum, one thing that we really like to do is give people good gifts. So we can spend hours like traipsing around the mall trying to find the perfect gift for someone, and we'll be arguing back and forth like this. And eventually we get a good gift and we give it, and like we get that thrill of giving. But I'd like to take it a step further and say it's not just like how you receive love or how you express love, but it can also be an expression of God's love. So when we do that, there's a pretty cool thing, and it's like when we give to people for God, he gives straight back to us. There's this verse in Luke, and it goes, "Give and it will be given to you. A good measure pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." And that's kind of saying what you give is what you're going to receive. Don't go subpar, just go full out. Like give for God and like put yourself on the line, and that's going to be what's given back to you in the form of blessings. And sometimes we don't understand how those come back, or like we're not really quite sure, and we're like, God, where are you at? You just did this. What about this? But it's about like not having expectations as well. Like this is said in this way, and we don't know what it might be. And sometimes we're like, but yeah, it will come back to us in some form in the way of blessings. So a heart for giving is the third aspect, I'm pretty sure. So the fourth and fifth aspects come in the form of a story, and I would have read this from the Bible, but it's actually a whole book of the Bible. It's called Esther, and it's in the Old Testament if you want to read it. So instead of reading the whole thing, I'm just going to tell you guys a story, and I know it pretty well from VeggieTales. It's like one that I watched a million times. But yeah, this is the story of Esther, and she was this Jewish chick, and she was living in Persia, and yeah, sorry guys. She was this Jewish girl living in Persia, and she was in minority. Her people had been taken from Jerusalem a long time ago as slaves, and she was living there now. She was an orphan, and she lived with her cousin Mordecai, who worked at the palace. So life was pretty tough for her, and she had like all this stuff going on. She wasn't really up there and that sort of thing. But one day, the queen, who was called Vashti, she displeased the king, and he ended up banishing her from the kingdom. And he was like, oh no, my queen's gone. What am I going to do? So he thought the obvious solution was to hold like a nationwide bachelor. And he got all of the beautiful maidens, and he brought them to his palace, and he like got them beautified and all that sort of thing. And Esther was actually chosen as one of them. So she lived in the palace for 10 months before she got to meet the king. But when she did meet him, she found favor with him, and he actually made her his new queen, which was pretty epic. So her life, going from being like poor and orphan and a minority, her people were persecuted. She had been completely turned upside down. She's this queen now, and she's got all of this riches and wealth and power and authority in this kingdom. But there was a man, and he was called Haman, and he was second in command to the king. And he really hated Esther's cousin Mordecai, who worked at the palace, because Haman was super high up there. He's second in command. He's like the king's go-to man. So when he would ride through the streets on his horse, all of the people would bow down to him. But Mordecai, he was a Jew, and it's like, you shall have no other God before me. So he wouldn't bow down to Haman, and that made him absolutely livid. And his logical response, this is just a story of logical responses, he thought, man, I'm not just going to go and get Mordecai for not bowing down to me. I'm going to go get his entire nation, all of the people that are close to him, all of his family, all of his extended family. I'm just going to go and I'm going to kill the Jews. That's what he decided he was going to do. And he went to the king, and he was like, there's these people in our nation, and they're doing bad things. They're not listening to your laws. They're hurting other people. We've got to get rid of them. And the king was like, man, this is my best friend. He's telling me this. Geez, I got to get rid of these people. So Jordan's laughing at me, and it's putting me off. But yeah, so he goes, yeah, we got to get rid of these people. And Haman was able to issue an edict which said, on the 13th day of the 12th month, everyone could plunder the Jewish homes and kill the people in it and take all of their stuff and just wipe out this nation because they had been like against the king, even though they actually hadn't. So obviously the Jews were like, what have we done? And there was this great bewilderment and everyone was scared, and they were like, it says in the Bible, they covered themselves with sackcloth and put coal dust on their head because they were in this great deep mourning. And if we go back to the start of the story, I don't know if any of you guys remember, but I was talking and I was saying that Esther herself was a Jew. She was part of this minority that had been taken as slaves all this time ago, but she didn't actually tell anybody when she came to the palace. She kept it a secret. The king didn't know, only Mordecai knew. So as soon as she heard, she was like, oh my gosh, my people, what am I going to do, my cousin, all this sort of stuff. And she said, she sent him a message actually, and she said, go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day, and I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, and even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Because there's this rule, and it was like the king had his throne room, right, and he had all of his attendants down the side sort of thing, and if somebody was to come up to him and like be unannounced and want to ask him something and present a request, he could hold out his scepter to them. And this is like this kind of like gold staff sort of thing with like ball on the end. I don't really know, to be honest. But he had this scepter, and if he held it out to them and they could come up and touch it, and when they touched it, they would be able to present their request. But if he didn't hold out the scepter to them, then they would actually be taken and they would be killed for disturbing the king. So Esther, even though she was a queen, she was going to the king unannounced because she wanted to plead for her people, and luckily when she went, he actually did hold out the scepter to her and she was able to present her request. So she goes to the king and she's like, hi, I was about to die, I wasn't sure there. But the king's like, don't worry, what is it that you want? I'll give you up to half of my kingdom. And she actually was like, she says, if he and Haman would please come to dinner with her that night, and that she was going to present her request then. So the king was obviously kind of like, what is this girl doing? I don't understand it, but okay, I'll come to dinner with you. Your request must be pretty important. So he and Haman went to dinner with her that night, and he asked her again. He's like, okay, Esther, what do you want? I'm willing to give you up to half of my kingdom. And she said, if it pleases you, would you please come to dinner with me again the next night? And he was like, okay, sure. And she's like, and Haman as well. So Haman's like, yes, I'm dinner with the king and queen. I'm so important. I'm so cool, that sort of thing. And so they left. And then the next night, they came back and they were eating dinner together. And the king goes, Esther, what is it that you want? Please tell me now. We've had these 2 dinners. I don't understand it. Please just tell me. It must be really important. And she goes, if I have found favor in your eyes, O king, and if it so pleases the king, give me my life and give my people their lives. We've been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, sold to be massacred, eliminated. If we had just been sold off into slavery, I wouldn't have even brought it up. Our troubles wouldn't have been worth bothering the king over. And the king absolutely exploded into rage, and he demanded to know who this evil orchestrator was and like why he'd done what he did and like what he was doing. And Esther told him, she's like, actually, it's your second in command who's here having dinner with us. It's Haman. So the king goes like ballistic and he stalks off into the garden in his rage because he doesn't want to like hurt anyone. And he comes back in, and Haman had been groveling at the feet of Esther, and he was like, please don't do this, I don't want to die. He obviously like loves you a lot and he wants to look after you, and he's gonna kill me. And the king comes back in and he actually thought, he's like, what is this guy doing? He thought he was molesting Esther, so he picked him up and he like threw him out, and Haman ended up being hung. Yeah, it's pretty intense. But the king, luckily, he calmed down after Haman died, and he was like, I've got to fix this. I've got to do what's right. So he cancelled the edict, and he wrote copies of a new one letting all the Jews defend themselves, and he issued them to be distributed in all of his 127 provinces. He had provinces from Ethiopia to India in every language, and he gave Esther Haman's entire estate as well. So the Jews were obviously safe now, and they had this massive celebration and cheering and feasting, and many non-Jews became educated, and being a Jew was no longer dangerous, and Esther had saved her people. But when we go back to my factors, the fourth factor is sacrifice, right? Because Esther had to put everything on the line. She had to risk her comfortable life to become uncomfortable. She had to sacrifice to bring about this godly social justice. And when it is sacrifice, even like just normal sacrifice, is always going to be like some sort of thing that hurts you. It's going to be like maybe you lose some money, or maybe you have to invest your time if you don't necessarily want to, or like your energy, you can be like physically drained. And there's always going to be people that will be opposing you or don't like what you're doing, or they might be judging you and that sort of thing. And it's definitely sucks sometimes when you're trying to achieve something like big, but you've got to sacrifice for it. But it says in the Bible, there's this verse in Matthew, and it goes, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. For in the same way they persecuted, rejoice and be glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." And that's kind of talking about like God always sees our earthly suffering for him, and he is going to reward us for it when we get back into heaven. But it's our suffering and our sacrifice for him. We can't just like go jump off the roof of a building and break our back and be like, "Bless me, God," because that's not sacrifice, and that's not suffering for him. It's just us being a little bit stupid. So yeah, when it's for God, like with Esther, she was saving God's people, so her suffering and her sacrifice counted because it was for the kingdom of God. So a willingness to sacrifice is the fourth factor, and it's like sacrificing for godly social justice rather than just sacrificing for yourself. The fifth factor, let me find it, is compassion. Because Esther, she was this queen. She had great beauty. She had great wealth. She had great power. She was fine, and she was anonymous. Nobody knew she was a Jew other than Mordecai, and she would have been just fine on her own. But because she had this radical compassion, she was able to like step out and put herself on the line for her people because she wanted to save them and give them the justice that they deserved. So she didn't have to do it, but because she had radical compassion, she did do it. And there's this kind of cool thing that I quite like. In Esther's name, Esther actually translates and it means star. But that wasn't her birth-given name. Her birth-given name was a Hebrew name, and it was called Hadassah. And that actually means compassion, which I thought was pretty cool. So she herself was actually compassion in like the literal sense of it. And that's why like radical compassion is the fifth factor. And yeah, going on. I can see some of you here, and you're sitting and looking at me, and you're going, "Yeah, this is all good, but that's a lot." And you're right, it is a lot. But I was thinking about it, and I was like, "Megan, you got a lot here. What are you going to do? They're going to be freaked out." And then I was like, actually, you know what? We don't actually have to be all of these things. We are called to like aspire to be all of these things, but it's not actually attainable for us to be able to be everything. And the cool thing is that we don't actually have to be. There's a verse in 1 Corinthians, and it goes, "Now you are the body of Christ, and each of you is a part of it." So we as a church community are the body of Christ. Yeah. And it's pretty cool because like we work as one unit, and we have like a whole bunch of the people that make everything work and that sort of thing. And it's kind of like Gracegate. With Gracegate, we've got people that do the coffee, and the people that sing, and the people that welcome people in the morning, and those who make the food, and even just the people that show up and be here. But it's kind of like the spokes of a wheel. So we've got, I'm going to put this on the ground because I don't want to whack myself in the face. But we've got all of these different parts and different spokes. Like this could be the people that sing, and this could be the people that welcome in the morning. Maybe like these are the kids that come to kids' church, and this could be the kids' church leaders, and this could be the person that plays drums, and this could be the person that plays bass. But everything comes together to make it able to roll and like work as one unit. So my point is, don't ever feel like you can't contribute, because we can make Gracegate work, right? If you've seen how awesome it's been today, and it's pretty cool, and that's just from a team of people. Like everybody in this room coming together and contributing to make it work. And godly social justice, honestly, isn't all that different. everyone has their own part to play in it. Like there might be somebody who has a voice, and there could be somebody who has a passion for change, and someone else who's willing to sacrifice. But when it all comes together, it makes it work as a whole. You can't just do it by yourself. It's not something that one person can achieve overnight. It's got to be everyone working together. Yeah. So the sixth factor, which is honestly my favorite one, it's the reason why we do it, and it's what links everything together. It's kind of like this bit in the middle, the bit that everything has to flow through, and the bit that everything connects to. And no matter what your gift is, or no matter what your contribution is that you've got to have this to be able to make it work. And that's actually God's love. And there's this verse, and it goes, "We love because he first loved us." And that's just the heart of it all. And it's these 7 simple words. We love because he first loved us, but we can't achieve anything without his love. We have it, but we can't achieve anything without it. So we've got to recognize the fact that we have it to be able to achieve this. And it seems like this massive, completely unattainable thing, like godly social justice, what are we doing? But when we have that, it's what links everything together. And just like this. To be able to make it roll, if we didn't have this bit, the wheel, it's not going to work that well. So when we've got that, it works. And the best bit is that he's given it to us, and he's modeled to us how to use it. Like, he's the ultimate role model. He loved us, so he spoke us into existence. He loved us, so he gave us the biggest gift, which was eternal life. He loved us, so he completely changed our fate forever. And he loved us, so he made the biggest sacrifice, his own son. He loved us, so he was radically compassionate towards us, even though we didn't deserve it. It's all about how we were helpless to him, so he created justice for us, but the complete opposite of the justice we deserved, and all because he loved us. So he was actually the voice of change for us. He's given us this great, mammoth, astoundingly huge amount of love, and he wants us to share it. And it's not actually as hard as you think. To be honest, I don't actually know which one of these things is mine. Like, I might have a little bit of some of them, and definitely not some of the other ones, but I'm sure you guys are the same. But what I am sure of is that God has given me talents, and I want to give back to him. So when we go back to the very start, we go, what's godly social justice? It's looking after others in service to God. That doesn't necessarily mean going out and solving poverty or clean water for everyone, but it can be as simple as just looking after people who you can see need looking after. So some things that I'm doing is in 2015, I went with Gracegate to South Africa on a mission trip. And at the end of this year, I'm going to Cambodia, which is kind of cool as well. And things like I volunteer at SALT and at Radiate. And it's one of the ways that I do it is investing back into people and looking after people in service to God and being an example in the way I live. And I think that's a pretty low-key thing, and I think a lot of us are like that. But that's actually part of the wheel, and it's part of what contributes to this godly social justice as a whole. So now that we know what's involved in godly social justice and that it's applicable to everyone, I'm going to ask you the question, how are you personally going to be the voice of change? What are you going to do? Whether you realize it or not, you're always saying something. Your voice is a constant, but are you speaking in a positive or negative way? Whatever you've been blessed with, I challenge you to take God's love and put it to action with the people around you. Whatever generation you're in, you have something to offer to the generations behind you. And I challenge you all to create change for the people coming next, but to do so in sync with kingdom purpose. You'll be amazed at what can happen. Thanks. Yeah. So I'm just going to pray quickly for everyone, so if you can bow your heads and close your eyes. So, dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for today. I thank you that we have the opportunity to be the voice of change in other people's lives. Thank you for this awesome church family that we have and that we can be a part of it. I thank you for your love, which keeps everything centered. And please help us to remember that even massive things like social justice are completely attainable with you by our side, no matter which generation we are in. And we praise you for being the compassionate God that you are. Thank you and amen.